So this afternoon, we're going to change things up just a little bit. We're going to go into a panel discussion here. And we're really excited to have some of our MSB ABA alumni with us today to talk about their experiences as they've transitioned from being students into the workplace. So why don't you folks come on up here. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourselves. Come on up and take a seat. Okay. And, you know, people give me a hard time sometimes. I get this kind of goofy smile on my face when the students come back. Because one of the cool things about my job, I was telling somebody earlier, is I get the opportunity to get to know so many students really well. And when they come back year after year and I see all their successes along the way, it makes me really, really happy. And so I get that sort of goofy smile here. So Bradley, I think you're going to be starting it off for us today here. And as long as I don't break this, I'll be good to go. So Bradley, I'll turn it over to you.
Sweet. Thank you, Jay. Good introduction and good to see everybody here today. As Jay mentioned, we'll be talking through our experiences as young professionals in the working industry as we've transitioned from the classroom to the cubicle, if you will, in the past 1 to 2 years. We've got a good mix here of cohort 4 and cohort 5 folks. And like Jay said, just talking through our experiences, our roles, our challenges, and lessons learned of what we've seen thus far. So I think it'd be very beneficial as it's, relevant to the students in the room today, because as Sam Hampton mentioned, it goes by quickly and you'll be up here before you know it. So enjoy it and looking forward to a good discussion. We will do a quick round of introductions before we get into the discussion itself. I'll go ahead and get started. Bradley Parcell. I'm currently a program manager at NetApp in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was a 2019 BIT graduate and then went into the business analytics program, graduated in 2020, and here I am today. So I'll pass the ball to my cohort 4 classmate, Nikos, to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm Nikos Haristy. I also graduated from Virginia Tech in 2019 doing BIT DSS, and then also did the MSBA program with Bradley right after. Once I graduated, I joined Deloitte, and I've been a consultant there for the past 2 years. In my role, I am mostly a project manager, but also do some software development as well. My client there has been the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So what we're doing is conducting a IT modernization effort, which is taking their financial legacy applications to the AWS cloud and also performing some additional development and looking to innovate where we can, incorporating what new technologies are out there between AI, machine learning down in the pipeline. With that, I'll pass it over to Sarah.
All right, thank you, Nikos. Hey guys, I'm Sarah Spicer. I was part of cohort 5, so I was a year after these guys for the MSBA program. Finished that up in 2021, so a little over a year ago. Prior to that, I did my undergrad here. I majored in economics, and I did minors in statistics as well as data and decisions. And that was what sort of took me down that business analytics path and led me to the MSBA program. And then after graduating, I spent a year working for Alpine Consulting, which is a small technical consulting company based in the DC area. While I was there, I focused mostly on data warehousing, as well as like data integrations, building data pipelines, and then building data visualizations on top of the data in that data warehouse. But very recently, I just made a transition to work for Capital One. Just started there less than a month ago, so I'm still kind of getting my feet underneath me there. But I'm working as a data analyst for the Enterprise Services Risk Team. So just kind of monitoring, really just similar stuff, a little bit less in the data warehousing and data pipelines, focusing a lot on visualizations and a little bit more analysis focused, making sure that everything is staying within compliance and all of the regulations that come working for a large banking company. So yeah, I will with that pass it to Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Collins. I was with Nikos and Brad in Cohort 4. I have a different trajectory on getting to this spot in my career. I graduated in 2012 with a undergrad in education from Tennessee Tech, and I taught for 9 years within the public education space, and then, don't kill me, I was adjunct faculty for the University of Virginia and in the music space, and then throughout all that time I was also working within the music industry, publishing, copywriting, session work in Nashville occasionally, and then working throughout the Southeast and into Central America with some other initiatives within the music world. So you might be going, well, how the heck did he get here? That's a longer story, but came back to school to get my MBA and didn't really know what I wanted to do with that until I got here. And so now I'm working with Guidehouse. We're a consultancy firm. My main domain space is within the defense arena. My current project is working on the F-35 weapon system and providing support to them in a various capacity. And so, all that to be said is, you guys could be doing the same thing, so it's cool. But happy to be here, happy to be back in Blacksburg and seeing all, wonderful faces and campus and everything, so it's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the introductions, and now we'll get into the actual discussion itself. So, Mark, I'm going to hand the ball back to you as you were just going. Tell us a little bit about your experiences as a consultant at Guidehouse regarding analytics. Could you speak on maybe a specific project or just things that you've done at that space thus far?
Yeah, so I have the view of there's two types of people that come out of this program, those that are very tech heavy and then those that are not so tech heavy. I am not so tech heavy, okay? I understand how to leverage different skill sets and software systems and things of that nature, and how to leverage my very talented data team for a particular outcome. What I do mainly is interface quite heavily with our client, i.e. the government, to ascertain what their needs are and to close the gap and provide valuable solutions to where they're not wasting your tax dollars and efficiently maintaining weapon systems and things of that nature for also your security. So in regards to data analytics, we look at things not just in a 6-month time horizon or a year time horizon. My tasking is, can you tell me in 2055 when that tail number is going to be where, when, what needs to be done to it, and how are we going to pay for it? Yay. So that's a flavor of it, but there's also other factors in that you have to take into consideration. What happens when the supply chain gets wonky? I mean, that's happened to everybody. What happens if something falls through in regards to contract negotiations? And the list goes on. So how can we mitigate risk while still thinking forward in doing things well? So that's kind of my flavor of analytics. And it's, I came in from Tyson's yesterday where we had a 2-day working session for, basically 30 hours of, here's the problem. We have to have a solution by the time I walk out the door Wednesday, so we can execute, because I know it's going to take 2 weeks and we have a deadline coming up, in 4 weeks. So it's one of those things of, I'm not technically proficient with Python or things of that nature, but just enough to be difficult, cause damage. I have the eye for visualization and things of that nature in regards to Tableau, Power BI, things, the like, where we help other non-technical decision makers make informed decisions, and when to bring in the technical guys to actually provide some greater context if needed. But a lot of the times I'm the stopgap between those two environments and making sure I'm translating correctly to the customer what's going on and how we're meeting deadlines and all that. And so yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. That's
okay,
good.
Good.
Thanks for letting us know a little bit about how the federal government operates. So it's interesting to hear that perspective on it. Sarah, how about you? Previously at Alpine and now at Capital One, could you talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role at Alpine, at least the client that I was with, again, was a lot on like the data warehousing side. We worked for a really large global financial services company, and they had a ton of data, but a lot of acquisitions and stuff like that. So integrating all of that data and getting it into one place really presented a challenge for them. And a pretty typical ask of us would be some team comes to us and says, we know this data exists somewhere, obviously have no idea where, and we have no idea, they're a front-end user of the data. Like they don't understand the piping behind it or the complexity of getting it to where it could be visualized and easily accessible for them. Which there's actually, for those of you who may not know as much about data warehousing, there is a lot more complexity to it, to getting the data, properly transformed and, all of the connections behind the scenes. There's a lot that has to go into it. So they would come to us and, make these requests. And, obviously they would think, oh, this is super easy. This data exists. We just want to see it. But then we would kind of be responsible for going behind the scenes, finding that data, finding the source system, making that connection. We used a lot of Oracle tools, a really powerful tool called Oracle Data Integrator that just lets you really easily make transformations to data, take it from one place, put it in another place in a different format, and then we would build them visualizations on top of that. So it was just a lot of doing that, different subject areas, different areas of the business. So that was definitely fun. I really enjoyed my time there. I think it was a little more, as Mark was kind of mentioning, you can be a little bit more technical, a little bit less technical. That was definitely a little bit more on the technical side, I think, than where I am now. We definitely still do, with my team with Capital One, we use Python and stuff a lot, so we are using some scripts. We're doing some automation through Python, but I think the thing that I'm most excited about is really looking at data, creating data visualizations, and making presentations to really explain why is this happening. As I mentioned briefly that I'm on enterprise services risk. So basically, what we do is all of Capital One's internal applications and web services that they use, anything like that, just making sure that we're staying within compliance. We're not putting ourselves at risk for, leaking data, anything like that. And so it's kind of cool to be on the data analysis side of that and really looking at all of the metrics that we can collect from that to monitor that and make sure that we're doing okay. And if we're not doing okay, why is it getting worse? Looking at the trends, what's going on, what might have changed, and how can we address this, and making sure that we're escalating that to the right level so that any issues do get addressed before it becomes a major concern. So again, very new to that. I haven't really gotten to do a whole lot of that myself. I've been basically just looking at work that already happened, but I'm definitely excited to get more into that.
That's awesome. And that'll be exciting as you get into it, you learn more and then see where the future takes you. Nikos, what about you at Deloitte? Can you talk a little bit about your experiences?
Absolutely, Bradley. Thanks, Sarah, for sharing. I think we have a similar role, but for my project, as I mentioned, we support the housing and urban development government sector. And so what we're doing is taking their old financial legacy applications, so these are databases, systems, front-end applications that have been created long ago that are stored on on-premise servers, and we're taking that to the AWS cloud. So a lot of my work involves data ingestion, so something like source to target mapping. We get a lot of data from a lot of different places, and we have to ingest it, process it, and make sure it's available for downstream consumption to other applications. Working in the federal housing market, essentially what HUD facilitates is the federal mortgage-backed security market. So if anyone's seen The Big Short or remembers, mortgage-backed securities are where you package up a set of loans and you sell them as an investment vehicle. Well, essentially HUD does that, but for federal loans. And the federal housing market's pretty sizable. I believe last year is somewhere just over $2 trillion worth of federal loans that were given out to millions of families, and it's really supporting a large part of America. So what the applications we're migrating and hoping to build upon are the applications that operationalize it and make sure that, information is reported accurately on time. Things like, making sure that people can consume this data and make investment decisions based on, what our models say and other things like that. So that's a whole effort of our project, and my role has been twofold. One, in a project management position, we have a couple, numbers of applications that we're migrating. I am helping lead the effort for 3 of them, so that includes things like managing, what we're doing from an architecture standpoint on AWS, what we're doing from a development standpoint, and then classic project management tools that we use, schedule, cost, things like that. So it's important, for me to see our project from a high-level view and also from that technical view as much as possible, so we can go to our clients and, provide them with the best recommendations and solutions we can. Aside from that, I'm also on one of our application teams helping support our database development and testing efforts. So in my role, I use a lot of SQL, helping run scripts, creating queries, making sure that our applications can run and produce information that we have from our previous versions of the application. So we go through many different environments, from our test environment to development to our systems integration test environment. Then we have users test applications, and finally it goes into production. So a lot of my role is helping make sure that when we conduct these tests, that we're producing the correct results that these applications should be. And across these applications, that's part of what we're managing, and that's the first part to our project, of course. The second part is, okay, once we have these applications running on the cloud, with the cloud you have enormous computing power, data storage solutions, things that you don't have with on-premise solutions. So now we ask ourselves, what can we do with this new computing power, storage, and all these applications integrated with each other to make these operations better, right? So incorporating AI, big data, do data stacks, whatever we can in the long term, so that the government is set up for success in this area. Because the government is risk averse, they have to make sure that privacy, security are at the foremost front. It is a process to make sure that whatever we recommend is in line with their vision of what this federal housing market looks like. So it is a task, even though I'm a consultant, not project subject matter expert yet, it's still a task for us to help research, determine what's the best path forward, what are some risks in the future, how does this technology play, is this the right move, so that when we're in 2030, 2040, we're set up for success and we don't have to backtrack on what we've been doing.
That's great. And speaking to those data migrations, to the cloud, those are huge projects, and as you're well aware, Nikos, but they take so long. They're not easy lifts, right? That is heavy material, substantial, right? But as we heard earlier from Mabi at Norfolk Southern, right, that allows these companies to go and run with digital transformation, right? To go and change the way that they do business. So now that we've talked through our roles, what we've done on day-to-days, let's touch base on something that's not so popular. What are the challenges that we're dealing with, right? Because no job comes just, you skip down, the lane and everything's great, right? What are some hurdles you guys have had to jump through and, led to lessons learned?
I can start. So, when I joined Deloitte, it's a big firm, was unsure of what my role would be, was a little anxious about, do I know enough? What are they going to put me on? And when I joined this project, it's an ambitious project for the government sector. Not too many government organizations are in the middle of a cloud migration, or they're in the stages where they're planning for it and thinking about it. So when I joined, I come from the MSBA program and a BIT background, so I didn't know too much about what cloud is and how that relates to data analytics. So the first thing that, if I were to tell myself when I started, I would say, you know what, it's okay that you don't know everything in the data analytics world, in whatever technology that you may go into, cloud, whatever it is. We're human, it's okay. What matters is that you take initiative and you be proactive in whatever that you have ahead of you to dive in as much as possible. And what that means is reaching out and relying on your colleagues and your mentors that you can find in your companies or even outside of companies to kind of help you, guide you through that process, and making sure that you take the extra steps that you need to get up to speed or just be well-rounded in a bunch of different areas. In the data analytics space, it's not just one role, right? There's data analysts, there's data scientists, data engineers, so many different roles, so many different concentrations that no matter what company you're on, you'll be on a team full of people who have a diverse set of skills. So one thing you'll need to make sure of is, I want to make sure that I can communicate, understand people's problems, understand what they do, and use that to get knowledge that you need when you go into your careers.
Yeah, I can kind of continue off of that. I think that's a huge point. And I think that's something that, as I've faced challenges, has really been a learning curve for me, is getting comfortable reaching out and asking for help. I think when you've just started, you feel like a little fish in a big pond, and you're, is it okay for me to message this person? Is it okay for me to email this person? Because you don't want to be, going too high up and asking a super technical question to somebody that's like, 10 levels above you. Usually they would receive it well, but you just don't want to be that person necessarily. So I think that was also kind of a challenge for me getting started, just being comfortable. Obviously you want to, as Nico said, look to your resources that are available to you, try to figure out as much as you can on your own. But then there does come a time when, I could spend 5 hours searching the web for the answer to my question, or I could ask my teammate who could probably answer it in 10 minutes, and so definitely leveraging your teammates and those around you when it is necessary. I think that was a huge learning curve for me, and getting comfortable with that, and figuring out when is it appropriate to do this, and how can I do it in a good way that is respectful of their time and is not making the ask huge on their part, but still getting the help that I need and being able to progress forward in what I'm doing. So I feel a lot more comfortable having had that experience with my first role. Now that I've started at Capital One, I think that's come a little bit easier to me, and it's definitely made the transition and learning our team and our function and our technologies and everything a little bit easier. So I think that was definitely a big challenge. I think another challenge for me personally, which is something that you don't really have the opportunity to learn in school as much. But when you're faced with a data set, trying to actually understand the context of that data set and what it means. You don't necessarily have somebody telling you, this is what this field is, and like this is what it actually, why we care about it, or what it actually means in the real world. To give kind of a practical example, when I was working for the financial services company, our client at Alpine, a lot of the data that we were dealing with was like accounting data. And, I took maybe 2 accounting classes or something. It definitely wasn't like my strong suit. The terms were familiar. I kind of knew what they were talking about, but it was a lot of, for me, even when I'm dealing with accounting, when I Google it, I'm reading it, I'm like, this still doesn't make sense, So I think that is a particular challenge coming out of school and going into the real world, is just realizing that, it's just as important to have those technical skills, have the SQL, have the Python, whatever, as it is to also be able to adapt and, understand the context of what you're doing and why it's actually important. So I think those have been two really big challenges for me to overcome, and definitely still working on it.
Yeah, I would agree with all that's been said. And, might be different for others, but the challenges that I've had so far over the last 12 months it's been difficult, but not cumbersome. And a lot of it's because it was all new things. So, for example, I get an email at work and says, oh, by the way, Mark, you're going to handle the EDSP and the TCP for this contract. All right, a technology control plan and something data control plan. Basically, it was saying, here, you have to draft out every conceivable, parameter that your team is going to agree to, that the government agrees to, and our clients and everything else, to where we are safeguarding data. And that has to go through legal, that has to go through partner level, that has to go through ethics and compliance, making sure that I'm not doing something off the mark to where someone could say there was impropriety going on between me and the client. That was a hurdle because, well, I didn't go to law school. I can read something, but making sure. So, but I've done it. So now I can do it again. I've actually helped individuals in the firm younger than me, junior guys, do that. And so challenges, okay. I think some people get too bogged down in the challenge rather than just going, okay, cool, new opportunity. When I first got the job with Guidehouse, I looked at my boss and said, look, and this was before they gave the offer. I said, I'm not horribly technical. I'm going to be 100% transparent. If you're cool with a guy saying, I'll give it a shot as long as you don't get mad if I screw it up, hire me. And they went with that. And so far, every opportunity that's coming down the path that might be a challenge has been a growth opportunity that has allowed me to do above and beyond what I think I could have anticipated. And so, yeah, challenges are there. They're always going to be there. They're going to be there with your client. They're going to be there with the product development. They're going to be there with the data team. They're going to be there with leadership. They're always going to be present. It's just how are you, me, going to engage that problem with a particular mindset. I typically just try to err on the side of optimism rather than discouragement. So,
Totally agree there, Mark. Perception's everything. It is, even though you might have to jump over a hurdle, right? It is a learning opportunity, right? What's the saying? Smooth seas don't make good sailors. So, just another opportunity and continue to put another tool in your tool set. So let's transition from a challenge to a fascination, something that you enjoy. So let's talk on like an analytical piece. Maybe it's data visualization, creating dashboards, or like storytelling with data. What has been a fascination or an enjoyment post-college that you guys have seen with analytics?
well, not necessarily a fascination. In the consultancy world, there's churn, right? So that, a competitor of ours might have the contract, we outbid them, we win it, and they get disgruntled. They don't have to do a clean transition with their materials to us. So that happened in a particular project of mine. All I had was a PDF of output. And my client said, make that. Okay. That's great. But the fascination, though, was taking all of these piped-in data sources that we had to discover and had to understand the context. Again, not an aviation dude, all right? Plane goes up, plane comes down. I have a drink in between. That's my understanding of aviation environment, all right? So, but that was the fun part of our client going, that's where I can save 20 mil. Or for our international partners, that was able to help me give the business case to my government to fund this so we can stand up this operation. And so that's been the fun part of, all right, that's some pretty colors, the graphs are nice and neat and everything else, but okay, the client was getting the bang for the buck that they're paying us for to where they can make actionable decision, and that's the fun part. And at the end of the day, I can go back to the data guys and go, you did it, and I just get to be the forward face on that. Not that I did all the work, but so that's been the fun part in seeing value to where they can, discovering value to where they can extort that for their benefit in operations.
I can kind of go off of that. I think for me, it's very similar. That was what really attracted me to analytics in the first place, was just the ability to bring to light, interesting pieces of whatever it is, the world. Like there can be analytics in everything, and just being able to pick out, some pattern or something that actually leads you to a meaningful change. I think to me, that's the most fun part. And obviously being on my side of it, a lot of times it's, the client maybe discovering that after I've put together a visualization or something for them. But to me, that's just super rewarding. And, I think it's just really cool. I think analytics as a whole, whatever role you play in it, I think that's just a really cool outcome, is that, whether it be $20 million or, limiting emissions or something, really meaningful to a company or to the world as a whole. I think that's probably my favorite part of analytics, is just feeling like I'm actually making a difference, however big or small it is. Just being able to take data that now it's pretty easy to collect it, and it's not that hard to analyze it, but what you can get out of that is so powerful. And I think that's probably my biggest enjoyment, is just playing whatever role I can in that process and getting to see that outcome. I think is really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Sarah and Mark here. I like to think of data analytics in some cases as us telling a story that isn't written yet or hasn't been discovered yet. So I agree with everything they said, but for one of my projects, we're taking a lot of structured and unstructured data that hasn't been analyzed yet, and part of my role is, okay, how do we get this ingested into our systems? How do we run some sort of analytics? And the real question is, what are we trying to run, right? We have data from decades worth of material, and so we're trying to figure out what matters to our client and what they're trying to accomplish. So working with our team to understand, here are the top 5 to 7 priorities. Here's what we should be looking for different areas that maybe we haven't seen in terms of defaults in our mortgage portfolio in the past, so we can be better suited in the future. So on one of our applications, looking through that, actually getting data into our application, running our queries, and actually seeing the final product in our test environments, for me, in my experience, has been one of the most satisfying experiences, sharing that with my team, the client, something in my early career, which is a big stepping stone for me.
That's awesome. So, ironically, we all just came to the same point, right? What's the most fascinating thing that we see in analytics? And it's all the value extracted to our stakeholders, whether they be internal or external, right? The value that they extract makes us feel good, right? And so it becomes a two-way street, if you will. The client gets great value from the work that we perform, right? But then what does it bring to us? That trusted advisor role, right? Where they come back. What's Mike Flint say, Mark? What's the best compliment a customer can give you?
More business.
Yep. So I know Mike's not here today, but that was our director in cohort 4. But it's so true, and it is really rewarding to see the client react the way they do and take that insight and the value away from a lot of hard work. So that's awesome. I wasn't expecting us to come at that point, but that is really neat. Yeah, it's a big thing and something that the current students can look forward to within the coming years. Just to be cognizant of time, we do have.
Now, I would say that it just sounds like we go in, we discover a unique thing to you can save here, and that automatically means they're going to act upon that. That doesn't always happen. We discovered something on one of the projects, and it was like, hey, here you go. And it was like, I love it, but my arms are tied. I can't. And so sometimes you have to realize stakeholders, even though you might find a wonderful piece of value that you can add, there's more than just you and the client at play sometimes. And so it's not saying, so they're just like, not now, maybe in 5 years. Because that's, in the cases that I'm working, that's our lead time on certain things. And so just wanted to throw that out there. It's not always peachy. So you can find wonderful answers to problems, but it doesn't mean that your client's going to take them. but you can still bill them for it. So,
I think that's just because you work for the federal government, Mark. That's just you.
with.
Sorry. All right, so we do have like 5 more minutes left, and I do want to give some time for Q&A. Real quick, just one last question. What's one piece of advice that you would give to yourself 2 years ago to where you are today? What would that be? And it's up for grabs.
Well, obviously, being the non-techie up here, be more technology-oriented. But I've reached that point where, as long as I'm aware, I understand how to leverage, how to converse about what we're doing with my data team, that's cool. Because basically every 6 months, something new's coming, and that's just not my gift. My brain doesn't work that way. So, but that's what I would say is be a little more techie. So,
That's why they have LinkedIn Learning.
for $39.
ROI. Sarah, how about you?
It's a really good question. I think I was lucky in my path through undergrad and then the MSBA program that I did feel like I got a good preparation. I learned some SQL, I learned some Python, R, all of that stuff, data visualization, Tableau, Power BI, which was definitely helpful. I think just getting exposure to all of that stuff. I think that if I could go back and give myself advice, it would be just to, take as many of those courses as you can, especially while you're a student at Virginia Tech, because LinkedIn, I think at least while I was here, LinkedIn Learning was free to us. So, any kind of perks that you get as a student, like really take advantage of that, because all of a sudden you get out and they want to charge you for it. They're like, you're making money, you can pay us money now. But just really taking advantage of that. And I think, a big one in data analytics is like if you can get as much exposure to SQL and like, as Nikos was saying too, like cloud stuff, I think that's a big future. And that's something that I didn't really have a whole lot of exposure to. So I think those are kind of 2 big ones, but really just as much as you can get exposed to while it's still free and available to you, definitely take advantage of that.
Right, yeah, absolutely agree with Sarah. And on that note, you can do LinkedIn Learning, learn through classes, but one thing I would have done too is be more formal in that regard. So go ahead and get certifications that you're interested in. There's a Google Analytics certificate that's really awesome. You'll learn a lot, and it gives you another feather in your cap in your early professional career. You're not expected necessarily to walk in day one to a firm or even in your first couple of months to have those types of certifications. But if you're willing, have the time and able to do it, I'd recommend, looking into what you're passionate about and showing recruiters or just, your professional network that you're serious about it and you have that background in a formal certificate.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nikos. Of just piggybacking off what you said, go check out some GCP certifications, Microsoft Azure, AWS. They're out there. And as you get into your roles, it's probably likely that your employer will pay for it or help, pay with the costs. So get out there, continuously learn, add another feather into your cap. I like that. I'm stealing that. But yeah, that's always be a lifelong learner and just continuously stay with the technology, because if you get into tech, that's the only constant, is that it's going to keep changing. And if you're with it, it's on your resume, you'll be in good hands. So that, pardon me, will conclude our panel discussion. But now for the next 5 or so minutes, do have an opportunity to open the floor to any questions that anybody may have. So the floor is y'all's now.
Colin O'Reilly, cohort 7. I was kind of wondering where you guys are at now in your career. How does that differ from when UT when you first started?
Way ahead, honestly. I mean, not to cut you guys off, but yeah, I'm doing things that managers are doing, and the purpose of that is because they want me there. Like talking to the head of the segment at lunch the other day. Hey, here's his vision. Well, he was saying, here's my vision of the next year. Do you want that? Oh, heck yeah, let's go for it. So I honestly have thrown out the window expectations of where I want to be outside of some generalities because I don't want to stifle any opportunity that might come my way. But this might be a little biased. Coming out of this program, I think you're going to be level set to be well ahead of some of your colleagues. Not a slam against them, just a reality.
Certainly.
Yes, so from an employer's perspective, outside of salary, what are the top two things that you look for in a place that you would like to work?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. I think for me, the biggest thing that I've found, especially with my recent shift in career, is just looking for work that actually excites me, and that I'm really passionate about, and is the direction that I want my career to go in long term. I think especially being early in your career, you don't have to. I think the world has changed a lot, in that you don't necessarily have to go to one place and stay for 40 years. You can. But there's definitely a lot more jumping around. So I think just being somewhere and getting experience in, what I really want to do, or what you really want to do, I think is a big one. And, I think just company culture as well is very important. I've been lucky to be in 2 companies that have a really good culture, very supportive of, work-life balance and making their employees happy and stuff like that. But I think it's definitely, you can hear some horror stories of people who are not in that kind of culture, where that, they don't really care if you're happy. They just want you to be doing good work, So I think for me, those are the 2 biggest, and you guys can feel free to add on.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think from an employer's perspective, the 2 things that we're looking for is, first and foremost, is this person willing to learn, willing to be open to new things, new technologies, or put in places that they may not be, have prior experience in. So having that drive, that passion to put yourself out there and kind of forge your own road is something that I know we at Deloitte look for. And secondly, through your formal education, you're learning about technical concepts, but also we're looking for people who can bridge the gap between that technical side and business side. That is a really important piece. When we were going through our cohort 4, they coined the term analytics interpreter. That's something that I've kind of embodied. You can find a place in the working world or any field where you can understand the technical side, know how to work with your engineers, your developers, or software folks, but you can also relay that information in a valuable way to executive clients, whoever else in business-friendly terms, and give them that value, because there are plenty of people who can do either, but fewer people who can do both. And in the information age we're in, those types of people are in high demand and will be for the foreseeable future.
I'd say, Sam, too, just one more thing, echo off of, just growth opportunities. I think as young professionals, we're eager to get out there and, we want to do good things, but I also don't want to be pulled back a whole lot. I want to run and, really kickstart my career. And I think, we all have done that by graduating from the business analytics program, right? And I just, frankly, don't want to be pulled back on the reins a whole lot. So if there is an opportunity to grow, that's certainly something that, I'm looking for. But, yeah. Any others?
Did you have a question?
Yeah, you guys already kind of answered that,
Okay.
so that kind of shift the question. Seth here on fifth-year architecture student, so I really relate to you not having a technical background and somehow shifting into the analytics. But I also love how Sarah loves the visualization aspect of it, because I think that's my strength of going from architecture analytics, but I have to be graphically intuitive. So my question is more so, do you think it's better to have a general understanding of a lot of different subject topics and areas, or is it better to just drill into one area and be a specialist in one area?
Well, you know, I would say for me personally, I'm the first. I'm just going to be a generalist all the time. And in the nature of our work, you know, 5 months ago, I was doing an audit on $700 million worth of federal dollars being spent for servicemen and women. Now I'm on aircrafts. You know, so I need to be competent, but nimble to where I can quickly stand up a project, execute, provide that value, and move forward. But in your case, because of a different background, yeah, it might be that, hey, you're going to be the top dog in regards to architecture and everything else, and figuring out how can we squeeze numbers to get value out, better product, everything else, and that's your vein. If that's kind of where your head's at, well, don't necessarily stifle that because others are doing something different. You could be the next big shot in that arena. So that doesn't answer your question, but but that's just my 2 cents on it.
I think my kind of personal opinion on that is I would say start more gradual. And again, this is like just my opinion. There's definitely multiple ways to go about it. But I think if you start more general, get exposure, then you will kind of find your niche and you will, you know, which I think kind of goes hand in hand with what Mark was saying. You know, as you start working, you'll kind of find, ooh, I like this, or, you know, I don't like this. And then you're going to do that over and over and over again. You know, once you get in your role, you will very quickly become a specialist in, you know, whatever it is you do because you do it every day. So I think while you're, you know, still a student and still learning and preparing for that, I think if you can just get exposure to stuff, and then, you know, especially if you don't have one specific role or company in mind or whatever, you know, then, you know, if you go somewhere and they're looking for a certain skill, you've at least got some exposure to that and, you know, some experience to speak to and understanding of it. And then, you know, the specialization will come with time. So again, definitely more than one way to do it. If there's one thing you know you love and you want to do, you know, go for it. But, you know, I do think if you're still kind of trying to figure that out, staying a little more broad is a good way to go.
Agreed. Depending on what you want to go into in this space, try and figure out what are the main, you know, key priorities or hot topics in that field, right? So, you know, choose kind of a smaller range of subjects where you're like, I think I really like this, and you can go a little deeper to get that exposure like Sarah mentioned. But once you can figure out, I know I like this role, I'm going to try it out, once you get there, you'll really want to drill down and learn as much as possible while being cognizant of how does this role play into the broader industry and field. That'll give you the best setup for success when you do enter your new role.
Yeah, I would just echo off that, you know. I'm a sports guy, so I'm going to put it in, you know, football terms. Go play some different positions, see what you like. You know, you learn how to run routes as a receiver, you know, you can do that. Then you play defense, right? You're learning how to cover that guy. So then you learn whether you like to score touchdowns or, you know, knock the daylights out of somebody, right? But you know what the other role is doing. So then you're sharpening your skills, right? You're more valuable. You can do a couple different things, right? So, yeah, just go learn. Try a bunch of different stuff. Alrighty. Well, I think that will conclude our panel discussion. Thank you to Nico, Sarah, and Mark for joining us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for participating, asking good questions, and just listen to our perspectives. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.